This week, the Conservatives are in open disagreement at the highest level about the tax and spend policies of the new government. The Prime Minister's just a month into the job. Should we all calm down and give Liz Truss more time? Does Labour have the answers to the current cost of living crisis? Tonight, we are in Westminster, in the heart of London, just a 15-minute walk from Parliament and from Downing Street. It's a lively discussion this evening, I have to say. We'll be talking about the last few days in politics, but also, are the lights going to go out this winter? Welcome to Question Time. On tonight's panel, Nadhim Zahawi, who is Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, is a senior member of the government. Having been Chancellor of the Exchequer in the dying embers of the Johnson regime, he then stood for the party leadership. He was eliminated early and turned his support to Liz Truss. Labour's spokesperson for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities is Lisa Nandy. The Wigan MP has long been talked of as leader material and came third in the Labour leadership contest of 2020. Brian Cox has been acting for over 60 years across theatre, film and TV. Having previously campaigned for Labour, he switched to the SNP and now supports Scottish independence. In the award-winning drama Succession, he plays the fictitious head of a multi-billion-dollar media family who many believe is based on Rupert Murdoch. The journalist Piers Morgan works for Rupert Murdoch as one of the star performers of a real-life family-run multi-billion-dollar media company. A television personality on both sides of the pond, he's known for his forthright opinions, shall we say. He famously walked out of the studio and his job at Good Morning Britain in a row over Meghan Markle, and now presents a nightly show on Talk TV and writes a column for The Sun. And Wilfred Emmanuel-Jones moved here from Jamaica as a 4-year-old. He's since gone on to set up the Black Farmer food range, owns a farm in Devon, has tried to become a Conservative MP and was appointed an MBE for services to farming. Good evening. Welcome to our panellists. Welcome to our audience here in the studio. Very good to see you. And, of course, welcome to you at home. Do join the conversation the usual way on social media at BBC Question Time, and we'll hear what you've got to say. But we have a lot of questions, so let's kick off. Our first question tonight is from Tony Brooks.
How long do you think Liz Truss will be able to continue as Prime Minister?
Piers Morgan.
I mean, tonight, I think she's done. I think if you come in at this stage with 2 years to an election, with the polling as catastrophic as it is, and it's a direct result of the very first thing that you do for the country, and you play casino politics with the nation's economy, and you put it all on red and it comes up black, and you then have to start rewinding and reversing half of your strategy, and there's a run on the pound. The Bank of England has to intervene and spend billions of pounds bailing out pension funds. Interest rates start soaring, mortgages start soaring. I'm not sure how she has the brass neck to stay on the job, along with her Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng. It's not because I'm pro or anti the Conservative Party. This is supposed to be the party of fiscal responsibility. But it couldn't be anything but the opposite. So I think I'm afraid they have gambled with our economy, with our finances, and it won't be them that suffers. It'll be the poorest members of our society who are going to wake up to some horrific bills, and they're going to say, well, we're helping you out with energy bills. Well, what about the mortgages? Because they're going to dwarf energy bills. So I'm afraid I think it's been an unmitigated shambles. I think it's been a reckless gamble. It should never have happened, and it's got to stop at the door of the Prime Minister. And people say, well, you can't get rid of her, but why not? They've had about 40,000 leaders in the last few years. Let's have another one on the fire. And then I want to hear from Lisa Nandy tonight. What are they going to do, actually, to restore the nation's
OK, well, Piers, we may well do that, but you can let me sort that out. Nadhim.
So when Liz Truss took office, she knew that we had to do something about energy bills. The forecast was the average energy bill would get to £6,500. I was Chancellor of the Exchequer, making preparations to put options in front of the new Prime Minister, and she made sure, literally within days, that people felt secure again. They were frightened of their cost of energy because of Putin. Putin was using energy to get back at us because of the help we're putting into Ukraine. The average family now will pay £2,500, not just for 6 months, but for this winter and for next winter. Businesses, I was concerned that we're going to see perfectly good, viable businesses going under because of the energy costs. She put a package in for businesses, a massive, massive intervention. On her growth plan, who's supporting the growth plan, right? You don't have to listen to Piers Morgan. You can listen to the Chambers of Commerce, to the CBI, to the Federation of Small Business, all saying this is the right plan for growth. The National Institute for Economic and Social Research saying growth will return to 2%. If it does get there, because Liz is focused on growth, then that additional 1%, we've had anemic growth over many years now, that additional 1% would bring about 45 billion into the exchequer, which means it pays for the tax cuts that she's introduced. Tax has got to a 70-year high, so we had to do something. Liz will deliver over the next 24 months, and you will be able to judge her and her team, I'm part of that team, on our delivery. We show by doing, and that's what Liz will do.
Brian.
Well done. I agree with Piers. I think it's dreadful. I cannot see how she can lead the country, and I don't think she can lead the country because I don't think people trust her. And if you don't have trust, you don't have anything. And I think that's singularly absent. And certainly what's been going on at the Tory party conference has been an absolute fiasco. You know, and we've seen it. We've all witnessed it. We've witnessed it on a daily basis. And she's the wrong person for the job. That's what I believe. I just do not think she is the right person for the job. And I also don't trust her. I don't trust her. There's something about her that I just simply do not trust. So I ain't a fan.
OK, let's hear from Origin. Man there in the blue jacket, right there.
The government needs to find £30 billion to make the sums add up, which is truly astonishing. But coupled with that, the Chancellor is going to have to announce his fiscal plan towards the end of next month, which is obviously adding time pressure. How is this going to be possible?
Actually, because I'm going to get round the order to the plan, but since you mentioned the fiscal plan, it's a bit confusing in that we were told the fiscal plan, the medium-term fiscal plan, was going to be announced on November the 23rd. Then the Treasury briefed journalists it was going to be earlier than that. Then the next day the Chancellor said it's going to be November the 23rd. And then it seemed to change again. Obviously you're in the Cabinet. When are we going to see the medium-term fiscal plan?
So what the Chancellor will do is deliver the fiscal plan. Part of that is the supply side.
I'm asking,
yes.
not asking what is it,
so the Treasury,
we'll get into when
the
is
Treasury will announce when the Chancellor will deliver the fiscal plan.
So is it November the 23rd or isn't it? That's all I'm asking.
As I said, the Treasury will announce when the fiscal plan
so we don't know.
Will be in place. And no, hold on a second. And
I'm
most
only
importantly,
asking about the date.
I hear you. And most importantly, that the Chancellor is working with the OBR, the Office
no, okay,
for Budget
I hear that.
Responsibility,
but in terms of the date,
to deliver that fiscal
either
plan.
we don't know or you don't know.
No, I'm just saying the Treasury will announce when we will, when the Chancellor will go to the Parliament and actually take Parliament and the nation through the fiscal plan.
So at the moment we don't know. OK, I hear you. The man there.
Does the Chancellor know what's in his fiscal plan?
Let's get round the audience for a minute, Piers, and I'll come back to you. Yes.
You've talked about these savings that we're going to make, but people's bills are going up massively more than just the energy bills. It's mortgages. Private rent in London's gone up 12%, and those gains are completely wiped out. So how can you justify not doing your homework and letting this shambles continue?
OK, I will come back to you, Nadhim. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions to you. Yes, the man at the back there with his hand up. Yes.
I think we live in a society which is all about throwing things away because we don't like it. We've kind of got rid of this whole let's fix it, let's work together and sort it out. We might not agree, or people might not agree with what Liz Truss is saying or doing, and of course there's a time to fix those things. But I don't think it should just be let's throw it away and start again, because we'll never stop. We'll just keep disagreeing all the time and thinking we'll get a fresh one, But time has come for us to actually fix stuff for once and for all, properly.
So when the Prime Minister talks about being a disruptor or disrupting what has gone before, does that appeal to you?
Well, yeah, because actually she's an individual leading a government, leading a party that has its sort of ways of working that needs to adapt and needs to evolve, and she's heading that up with some fresh, different ideas. It's a punt, it's a risk, it's a chance, but if we don't do anything, then we'll get the same result.
OK. The woman here in the front in the glasses.
Do you think that Liz Truss has permanently damaged the reputation of the Conservative Party?
OK. Well, Lisa, ask the first question. You can answer that one as well.
Yeah, well,
how long do you think Liz Truss will be able to continue as Prime Minister?
It's not up to me to answer the question about whether Liz Truss has permanently damaged the reputation of the Conservative Party. That's up to the people. And how long she's going to last, unfortunately, isn't. It's up to Tory MPs. That's the sad fact of the mess that we've ended up in, is that a handful of Tory MPs and Tory party members chose her. She didn't let on at all that this is what she was planning to do, and then she's announced a huge package of unfunded borrowing to target help to the wealthiest at a time when most people are struggling, and she's crashed the economy. I don't really give a stuff what the future of Liz Truss is, but I really do care what the future of 1.8 million people who are about to come off fixed-term mortgages, who are going to see their mortgage payments rise by £500 a month, wiping out any of the help on energy costs. I really do care what's going to happen to them. Piers asked what we would do about it. We'd reverse this budget in full and go back to the drawing board. The reason I say that is not because there aren't things in this budget that we would want to do, like targeting help to people right at the bottom of the earning scale, but because if you don't know how you're going to pay for it, then you can see what happens. You spook the markets, 40% of mortgage products get withdrawn, first-time buyers can't get on the housing market, and people's bills go through the roof. It's just completely and utterly irresponsible. If you want a plan for growth, you have to get money back into ordinary people's pockets and get them spending again in the economy. That's why we're saying investment in clean energy, good jobs and wages, investing in skills in young people all over this country. That's what a real plan for growth looks like, not targeting the wealthy, not uncapping bankers' bonuses, not looking after your friends in the city, but backing the people of this country to succeed.
OK, but Lisa, I mean, look, I would say to that, great, and I'm sure a lot of people will agree, but they're also going to say, well, how are you going to fund it? Because one of the big problems with Kwasi Kwarteng and this budget is that there's been no concept and no planning. I mean, for the Prime Minister to admit no groundwork was done.
You are witnessing a rare thing here, where I'm agreeing with Piers Morgan and he's agreeing with me.
But I think the really important thing
he's
is,
also asking you how you're going to do it.
But I'm actually asking you, are you prepared to tell the country how you would fund your economic recovery, which is what it will now be?
Absolutely are. So we said tax the big oil and gas producers. The profits of the big oil and gas producers, that would have given us £8 billion towards the contribution over this winter. It could raise tens of billions of pounds over the next couple of years.
And you know it. Well, I was Chancellor of the Exchequer. You know that those gas and oil producers were already have a windfall tax.
You know because you were in the Treasury.
You've got to be honest with the nation, right? When you talk about that, you've got to be honest when Piers asks you a question, right? We're already taxing the oil and gas producers a windfall tax. They already pay double the corporation tax. It doesn't touch the size compared to what we've just done, right? The average household will only now pay £2,500. It doesn't touch the size. So you need to be honest about this. In what you say to the nation.
Let Lisa answer.
OK, you talk about being honest. You were the Chancellor of the Exchequer until a few weeks ago. Tell us what the Treasury forecasts are for the profits of the energy giants.
So, first of all,
I'll tell you the answer.
It's spurious.
It's 170 billion.
That's not true, because, again, that's another lie.
What is it then?
170 billion is around the whole world.
What is it?
That is the whole of the energy industry in the world.
Well, tell
You're
us
not going to tax the whole world's energy output,
tell us
right?
Tell us what the forecasts are and why you're not
I tell you what. Wait a minute. Stop. Nadhim, I'm sorry. If you both talk at the same time, no one is going to hear anything. Can you hear what's going on when everyone's talking at the same time? So let's not do that. We haven't heard from Wilfred yet, so I'd like to hear what you've got to say.
Okay. 4 weeks. We're actually trying to say that after 4 weeks, we are going to make a decision about whether Liz is any good or not. If we were having this conversation...
I thought you were giving her 4 weeks. No, you're saying we shouldn't be deciding after 4 weeks.
No, what I'm just saying is that we're having this discussion about whether she's going to be Prime Minister based on the performance of 4 weeks. I just think, in all fairness, it's just a ridiculous conversation to be having. If it was if she had 12 months, it would be a fair conversation.
But quite a few Conservative MPs are having this conversation.
Look, there's a lot of people, you know, the thing that has happened at the moment, she's being bold. What she's trying to do is something very, very bold. And when you do try and do things bold, sometimes you get it wrong. Earlier on, I was saying, the key thing for success is that you need to be able to accept that you do fail at some things. And I say this, the key thing when you do get it wrong is that you need to pivot, and you need to pivot fast. You have to admit you've made a mistake, and you've got to move on. If you live in a climate where people are afraid to fail, you stand still, you stagnate. So if we all agree we need to do something, we've got to change the orthodoxy, We have to give people a chance, and you've got to give them more than 4 weeks before you decide whether they're any good or not.
So when the ex-Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, says she's got 10 days...
Well, that's just going a bit too far. I mean, that's ridiculous to say that somebody has only got 5 weeks before we determine whether they're any good or not. It's ridiculous.
The woman there with black hair and the blue top. Yes, you.
Precisely how will Liz Truss grow the economy? We haven't seen any plans for growth.
OK, and the woman next to you.
I was just going to say that she was elected by a very small minority of the population. She's being bold. She's moved away from the Conservative manifesto of 2019. Isn't it time that the country had a choice?
So you think she hasn't got a mandate to do the things that she's doing?
I don't think she has a mandate. If she has got a mandate, then she should be brave enough to have it tested with the electorate.
Nadhim?
So it's a really important question about how we're going to grow the economy. The
question is, does she have a mandate?
I think, well, first of all, we have a democracy where a leader was elected, but if that leader is then removed, we have a process. We will have an election.
We've got the former Culture Secretary, of course, hang on, Nadine Dorries, saying we have no mandate from the people to do this, i.e. to do the things that the government you're serving in is doing. People voted in 2019 on the policy promises we made. If we don't want to deliver on the deal, we need a fresh mandate. She's wrong about that, is she?
Well, what I'm saying to you is we have a process here. Liz stood on an agenda that she's delivering against. The lady was asking about how we're going to return to growth. So the thing I talked about energy earlier, about keeping every household's average energy bill will be at £2,500. That actually has an impact on inflation. It brings inflation down for up to 5%. That's a good thing. Why? Because inflation is what hurts the most vulnerable. So embedding high inflation is a bad thing. Her policies is making sure that we grow as well as bear down on inflation. How do we grow? You cut taxes. You keep 31 million people can keep more of their hard-earned
So
money.
Nadhim, just on the point about taxes, you've got the Institute for Fiscal Studies saying that for every £1 given to households through these tax cuts, £2 is being taken away because the tax and benefit thresholds have been frozen. So what they are saying is that despite these tax cuts, people are actually going to be worse off.
Great question. So let me deal with that.
Well, I'm just stating, I'm not asking a question, I'm just saying that's what they're saying.
So you'll also know that you can earn up to £12,750 now, up from £6,500, right? And you don't pay any tax. That's the highest threshold in the G20.
But right? so just to be clear, is the Institute of Fiscal Studies wrong on that fact?
No, what I'm saying to you is...
people will actually be worse off because of the freezing the tax threshold?
No, what I'm saying to you, the tax threshold wasn't touched by Liz Truss's growth plan, but we moved to reduce the tax for 31 million people from 20p in the pound to 19p in the pound for next year, right? That's a good thing because it keeps money in people's pockets.
But so the IFS is... sorry, just to be completely clear.
Yes.
Because it's very important, I think, to everybody here. Tell me if you think this is worth pursuing. If the Institute for Fiscal Studies is saying that people will be worse off, are they wrong about that? You should know, obviously, as a former Chancellor.
No, what I'm saying to you is we already moved on thresholds. We've already moved to the highest tax threshold in the G20.
I'm not getting an answer.
So you can earn £12,750 and not pay tax at all. But can I just finish my point?
In the away, I don't think you're answering the question.
Well, no, I was answering the question. You asked about thresholds. But I answered.
No, I asked if the Institute for Studies is right, that people are going to be worse off.
No,
and you haven't actually answered that.
IFS was looking at whether thresholds were changed. No, they haven't. I'm giving you what we've done on thresholds.
OK, the man in the pink shirt.
Liz Truss wasn't elected from us as a nation. She was elected by a small selection of people. She hasn't got a mandate to represent all of us. And just to go back to your point about making mistakes, I was speaking to my apprentice today about making mistakes. It's an opportunity to learn, I get that. Some positions and roles, you don't get that opportunity. If you're flying a plane, you can't make a mistake. If you're a surgeon, you can't make a mistake. She's the Prime Minister. She shouldn't make a mistake.
Absolutely. Quite right. It is absolutely impossible to say that as a human being, whatever you do, you can't make mistakes. It's just impossible to even think that. It's just that in how we evolve, how we develop, is learning by our mistakes. There is no human being alive that can actually say they've never made a mistake. And to have that expectation of somebody is just a ridiculous expectation.
But Wilfred, I just say we're not at a time where we can afford these kind of mistakes. We're in a very crucial position. We simply can't afford these kind of mistakes. And they're being made time and time and time again. Okay. And it's got to stop. We need some vision, but we have no vision. This party has absolutely no vision.
Brian, let me just say something. One of the greatest leaders, Winston Churchill, one of our greatest leaders, made some big mistakes where lives were lost. And from those lessons, he then went on to be a brilliant leader. So no one could sit here and tell me...
You're not seriously comparing Winston Churchill...
Don't start. No, I'm not comparing the two, but I'm just saying even great people make mistakes. I'm saying that, that's a cheap shot. I'm saying even great people make mistakes, and it's about would you learn from that mistake?
So you're saying that Liz Truss is a great person?
We don't know yet. We don't know yet.
Well, I think we've got a pretty shrewd idea. I think we've got a very shrewd idea.
You cannot say somebody's a good or great after 4 weeks. I just think that's a bit unreasonable.
She literally tanked the economy with a mini budget. She tanked it. She crashed the economy. The pound fell to the lowest level ever against the dollar. People's mortgages are going to skyrocket. This is all baloney.
Okay,
she and Kwasi Kwarteng, her Chancellor, gambled with the nation's economy, and it has failed spectacularly.
So if you
and a great person, actually, a great person would concede, you know what, we had a go at this, it was horrendous, we've had to rein it all back, we're going to do the honourable thing, we're going to let somebody else have a go. I would rather we try somebody who at least is economically numerate, someone who has a basic understanding of the economy. And Nadhim, I've got great respect for you. You always used to come on Good Morning Britain when a lot of your colleagues wouldn't, and I'd bellow away at you and you just take it, and great. And you were great on vaccines. But for you, honestly, to sit there and try and defend this, what I haven't heard from anybody at senior level in this party in the last 10 days is one word: sorry. Sorry to the country for what you have put the country through. Do you want to say it?
So, Piers, you said that...
One word.
You said, no, I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you. Liz said, I've listened and I get it, which is why 95% of her economic policy, of her growth plan, she wanted to protect and will deliver, right? The stuff we've just talked about.
But are you sorry about the damage that's been done?
And the 5% that was damaging, she cut, and as Wilfred said, you cut and you move forward.
Indeed.
We've got 24 months to deliver. But Piers, no, hold a second.
I think the public
I'm going to tell you right now,
apology.
if you give me a chance,
sure.
Ask yourself this question. What would Vladimir Putin want us to do? He wants to be divided right now because he's using energy.
Oh, come on.
Because he's using energy.
Come on.
Absolutely.
Oh, come on.
You can't say sorry because Vladimir Putin may not like it.
I said to you...
Nadhim, people are laughing
Well, hold on a second. Hold on a second.
I just want to point that out.
Really?
Do you not believe that Vladimir Putin is using energy, which is where the inflation is coming from, where countries around the world are having to raise interest rates?
With respect, what does this have to do with a simple apology to the British people for the train wreck that has happened in the last 10 days?
I just said to you, Liz, in her conference, we said, I get it, and I
you sorry?
I changed the policy.
Are you sorry?
Of course I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
By the way, there's nothing wrong with saying, I get it, and I've listened, and I've acted, and 95% of what I want to do, I'm going to deliver, and I'll drop the 5%. That's a good thing. But for you to say that Putin has nothing to do with inflation is...
I didn't say that.
No, he didn't say that.
I didn't say that.
Sorry,
I said he had nothing to do with stopping you apologising.
Okay, so if you think he had something to do with inflation, then it has to do with interest rates going up.
So far, you've all...
Which countries have interest rates going up?
With respect, in the last 10 days, so far, for the monumental cock-up you did with this mini-budget, I've so far heard people blame the Queen and the funeral for what happened. You're now blaming Vladimir Putin, and I'm saying to you, actually, it's simpler than that. Your mini-budget caused the chaos.
Okay, tell you what.
Do you not think Vladimir Putin is using energy as a tool?
You've made that point. You've made that point,
Nadhim.
Of course.
Okay.
And countries around the world, bankers are having to increase interest rates.
But he didn't
both
do
of
your
you,
mini-budget.
you both made your points. You both made your points. You're now repeating them. Right. Fascinating that is. There's a forest of hands up here. So let's hear from loads of you. Okay, so the woman there in the red jacket, I think, with the glasses.
I just want to say, she's only been in the job 3 weeks before the baying press pack descended upon her. She's had criticism about whatever she does. The country is not in a recession. The pound has bounced back. She's trying to open up our economy. Give her a chance. I hate to see somebody denigrated like that.
Woman here in the front.
I'm a tax advisor, and what I would like to understand, I understand the hypothetical principle that giving people more money to spend will mean that we grow the pie. Fantastic. What I want to understand is your assumption behind where people are going to spend that money and who is going to spend it. Because although you turned on the 45%, which was great, you also repealed IR35 rules that are going to make it extremely easy for people who are high net worth individuals to pay tax at 19% through public service companies, rather than paying their tax at 40, 20 or 45%. So you're not only taking away from people who are more likely to spend, the people who are less well off, which you could have contributed to by expanding the tax bands for the 20 and the 40%. You've also made it easier for people with more money to pay a lower rate of tax. And that's the part that I personally don't understand. There are professionals that have called this a fiscal plan for tax abuse. If you're going to fund benefits, if you're going to fund the NHS, I don't understand where it's going to come from, because the tax cuts aren't going to grow the economy, and they're certainly not going to fund any of the
IR35 is quite a kind of, dare I say, niche and quite specific thing. I mean, there are people who are not earning lots of money, like, you know, lower paid IT specialists, what have you, who do want the IR35 thing to be repealed. So it's a reasonably complex thing, if you'll forgive me. Let's see, some people, you put your hands up now, oh, look, here they are shooting up again. Right, yes, the man in the glasses.
We keep hearing that she's only been in power for 4 weeks, we should give her a chance. She's been a cabinet minister since 2012. She's been chief secretary to the Treasury. She's been the foreign secretary. She's had enough experience. She's had enough time to get ready for this.
All right. And the woman there.
Yes. This is a question for Mr. Zahawi, really. You've mentioned that the average household will pay, £2,500 for their energy. I'm the mum of a family of 4, me and my husband, 2 young adult girls. We live in a 3-bed end terrace, which is energy efficient, and our bills are about £4,300 a year. So I would love to know how the government define this average household that we keep hearing so much about.
OK, and I'll come back to you on that. Yes, there's a man at the back there with a dark suit and white shirt. Yes.
Why is it so difficult for politicians to admit when they're at fault?
Well, I can ask. Lisa, do you want to answer that? I'm not saying, not anyone saying you're at fault, but I mean, do you want to just say that, because we haven't heard from you for a bit?
So I think that we operate in a climate in which politics has become incredibly adversarial, and somebody said at the beginning that they'd like to see us working together in the interests of the country. I think the difficulty is I have never worked with a government that has set their face against not just working with opposition parties, but working with their own party and with the public as well. A government that has no interest in taking people with them. I think that shouty exchange between Piers and Nadhim sort of summed it up for me. This is a government that is just incapable of saying sorry, and I think Nadhim is sorry, but he just couldn't say it.
Well, he did.
I think this is a government that is not only that, but has doubled down on crashing the economy. They announced these enormous unfunded tax cuts. And, you know, talk about giving people second chances. There are no second chances for people who can't pay their mortgages and find themselves in negative equity at risk of losing their home. There are no second chances for people who can't feed their kids and can't pay their rent and are facing eviction at the moment. And, you know, what I'd like to see from this government, actually, is not just saying we're sorry about one measure in this appalling package, but a contrition to say we got this catastrophically wrong and we're going to go back to the drawing board and we're going to sort this out. The question is not what were you thinking a few weeks ago, Nadhim. It's what on earth are you thinking now that you haven't made that commitment already?
OK, I'm going to take one more point for the audience. Yes, Claire.
Is Nadhim Zahawi an example of cabinet collective responsibility, with ministers being wheeled out to defend the indefensible in the early days of Truss's government, like happened throughout Johnson's, and this is just the beginning?
Right, Nadhim, look, there's been a lot of points, a lot of them coming at your direction. Would you like to answer that? You might want to help the lady out of the back who's saying, how do we agree this average household? Because you're clearly paying a lot more than £2,500.
It's based on average consumption of the average size of household. And of course, if you consume more than the average, you'll pay more than that. So I said the average will be £2,500. And I think it's the right thing to do for households and for businesses. of course. And of course, I take collective responsibility for what we do. Judge us by what we will deliver.
12 years.
Well, no, hold on a second.
She's been a present feature of every cabinet. Cameron, May, Johnson, and now.
We are a pro-growth cabinet. You are part
Presided
of the
over 12 years.
Anti-growth coalition.
12 years of low growth and high taxes.
You want to put taxes up, Lisa. Tell us which taxes you would cut. At least we are putting a plan forward where we're going to freeze.
We voted against your tax rises on working people. I'll tell you the answer.
So that people invest. I don't think you talk about wanting corporation tax to be frozen at 19%. That means people will invest in this country confidently. Cutting tax for 31 million people, that's a good thing.
Okay.
What's your tax? You don't have one.
You asked me the answer. I'll tell you the answer. That those who have the broadest shoulders should bear the greatest burden. It is unconscionable that when oil and gas producers are making record profits, you're making working people pay. Not good enough.
And if you cared about tax receipts, tax take, rather than tax rate, you would actually have a tax-cutting plan and return to growth.
Nadhim, forgive me. Right.
I'm glad you showed us how not to shout at each other.
Let's take a moment. Now, we spent a good half hour on this subject because we decide on the questions based on where your interests lie and what will provoke a good debate. Almost all of you asked about this, so that's why we spent half an hour on it. But there are other things that you also asked about, so I'm going to move on. Don't all put your hands down, because I want to hear what you think about this next thing. But before I do, I'm just going to tell you where we will be. So next week, Question Time will be in Brian's homeland, in the Scottish coastal town of Musselburgh, near Edinburgh. The week after that, we're in Cheltenham. So if you'd like to be at either of those two programmes, do go to the Question Time website, follow the instructions there, and you can come and be part of the audience. And also, you'll see a list of all our venues there coming up over the next few months. So keep an eye out for Question Time coming to a venue near you. Right, let's take a question now from Maysoon Barry.
A gas and energy emergency this winter?
Right, now, Nadhim, I realise that you've been right in the question is, will there be a gas and energy emergency this winter? So we've heard from the National Grid today that they think it's unlikely, but nonetheless they are looking at a number of scenarios, the worst case scenario being 3-hour blackouts. And we've also heard from Ofgem warning that there is a possibility that there could be shortages. Nadhim, you're in Cabinet. Just explain how this is going to work. People are worried about it. What can you tell us? Either to reassure us or to explain what's going to happen?
Absolutely, Mason. So I am in the Cabinet Office, and what we do is we look at a number of scenarios. Now, one of the things that we did very early on is to make sure that we ensured supply of gas, whether from Norway or from America or from the Middle East, continues. We're fortunate in that only about 3% of our gas comes from Russia, and that, I think, was the right thing to do, also to increase our own gas production. We've increased gas production this year by 26%. But we have interconnectors of energy with Europe, and that's also a good thing. And what we look at is really worst-case scenarios. If the interconnectors don't work, that is very unlikely. So I chair a committee that looks at all of this, and we have to make sure that we prepare for winter. But this is the sort of the worst case outlier scenario where everything, the internet connectors don't work, and we get a very, very cold winter. But we still have secured gas supplies for our country. The problem we have at the moment is that the gas price is linked to European gas prices, and Putin's using gas as a weapon because of the help we're putting into Ukraine, which is why we're working. Liz Truss today is in Prague, working with our allies to make sure that actually the interconnectors work, that the gas is...
Yeah, as you said, but just to be clear, because I'm not aware, I certainly haven't noticed warnings like this from the National Grid and Ofgem in recent years. This is a worst-case scenario as far as National Grid is concerned, but do you think it's a possibility?
It is highly unlikely because of the preparation we've made. But you've got to look at this is a worst-case scenario.
Piers?
I don't think we would be discussing this if people didn't think it might be a possibility. So it's come out today, and I think Nadhim is correct to say it's fortunate we're not as reliant on Russian energy as many European countries.
But do you think we should be adjusting our behaviour? I mean,
Absolutely.
so some European countries, so Germany,
yeah.
for example, for those of you who may not be aware, are asking people to turn the temperature down in their houses. They've reduced the temperature in the swimming pools and local buildings. France is switching lights off in municipal buildings, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I do, but I also think that longer term, we're going to have to try and work out a way of being self-producers of a lot more stuff, from energy to food. I think every country is looking at this. The idea that we're being held to ransom by Vladimir Putin with his illegal war in Ukraine is absurd. And in fact, you know, I've got to give him credit for this. It was Donald Trump who kept telling European leaders, including particularly Germany, your energy policy is insane. Relying so much on your energy for Vladimir Putin's, help is going to come back and bite you. He's been proven completely correct. So you may not want to accept that Donald Trump can be right about some things, but he was about that. And I do think as a country, look at food prices. All this escalates. I had no idea, I don't know about you, but that we relied so much on things like wheat from Ukraine, for example. And when that gets turned off, then we have a huge problem on the continent. So I think going forward, we've got to, as a country, produce more of our own energy and more of our own food. We have a great farmer over there. Farmers need to produce more here. We need to get to a net positive on exporting food from this country, not the other way around, so that we don't get held to ransom by global events. That is the longer term game. But in answer to the question, I don't think this would have been reported today if they didn't seriously think we might be in a position, if we have a rough, cold winter, where we get the power turned off for a few hours a day. And that's going to be pretty much the first time since World War II. So it's serious.
Man there at the back in the grey top, yes.
We've become so reliant on Putin's energy and other foreign energy. Shouldn't we be investing in green technology? And we can invest in offshore wind and solar farms, but we're not. Why aren't we?
Okay. Woman here in the check shirt.
I do believe it's also very important about personal responsibility, choices the individual makes. It's very easy to say the government needs to do this and parties need to do that. We do need to prepare for the future, I completely agree, but I think individual choices are very important. So things like deciding where should I buy my carrots from, it should be local produce. We're supporting seasonal produce, our own farmers. We shouldn't.
And in terms of energy supply, particularly?
As well, yes. So there's obviously small producers up in Scotland that we could be supporting. Things like water. Obviously, being an island, we've got gas that's being produced in terms of wind power and all of this. We do need to invest more. We can decide upon small producers, not just the big giants, support them that have 50% choice in environmental related sourcing, not just from our nuclear power and so forth, which is obviously an easy choice to make. It may be a little bit more expensive, but if we cut down what we're actually using at home, which we all should be doing anyway, then ultimately it might just balance out.
Brian.
Well, this is an opportunity for, as that young man said, to go green. And I think we really do have to go green. I think there's...
But that may take some time, and there's a possibility, a remote possibility, perhaps, that we will be
probably would take time, but then we need to do that. What we have to avoid is fracking, because I think fracking is very dangerous, and it's very dangerous to the country, because it doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. We know it's dangerous, and Rees-Mogg's idea of introducing fracking is a really, really bad idea. And we could be in deep trouble, really deep trouble. So I do believe in the green solution, but we've got wind, we have so much in Scotland. We have so much water, we have so much stuff that we can do, and we should use it.
And so I will come back to you, Nadhim, but obviously you've spoken already. Yes, the man there in the glasses.
Just to complement Brian's point, to replace half of our gas imports, we'd need over 6,000 fracking sites in the UK. Where exactly does the government think 6,000 fracking sites are going to go?
Okay. Woman at the back in the white top.
The climate crisis is really pressing, and there were protests in London today and this week about issuing of new oil and gas prices. Does the government not care about meeting its own net zero by 2050 targets?
All right, Nadhim, I will come back to you on these things, but let's hear from the rest of the panel. Wilfred.
This is what I think. I think that my concern is that there's a disaster coming towards us and we're not taking it seriously. And it reminds me, like COVID, that I think we are going to end up with having our power cut for 3 hours. And we have not started to adjust our behaviour. We should be talking about, do we need to have lighting in government buildings? There's a lot of things we should now start to do in terms of trying to stop the wastage. And if we don't do that, we're going to have a real big shock. In business, for example, I'm thinking, well, if we are going to be cutting off electricity for 3 hours, what do you do about freezers and chillers? How do you store food? Now,
so, Wilfred, so when the government says there are no plans for the government to tell the public to reduce usage for the sake of our energy supply,
well, that I think is a mistake.
I
think we should be saying to people, we should start planning now. We should be saying to employers whether we need to be saying to people, you need to be working from home. You need to be saying to people like me, well, how are you going to store food if we turn off the electricity for 3 hours? And I do not want what happened with COVID is suddenly it's upon us and then we have to react without having time to consider. So I would say we should be taking it a lot more seriously than we are at the moment. I just think it's an immediate problem.
Would you support that, Lisa, in terms of public messaging?
I don't want to scare people, but I think you have to take power outages seriously if the National Grid is warning about them. And it's not just homes, it's also things like hospitals and schools where the consequences could be very serious. But I think also we've belatedly realised that energy is a national security issue and that we have to take seriously our national security, which means we have to have homegrown energy supplies. So I think there are two lessons of the last decade. The first is that we've got to have far better relations with our closest neighbours in Europe, and we've got to start repairing some of the damage that has been done. And the second is that we need to learn the lesson from the degrading of gas storage, from the cutting of subsidies to solar, from the banning of onshore wind, and all of the other things that the Tories done over the last 10 years that have left us uniquely exposed. It's why we made it a priority at our conference a couple of weeks ago to invest in clean energy, because the tragedy for me of where we've got to now with a Prime Minister who spent her leadership contest lamenting solar panels appearing in fields across Britain is that what the Tories don't seem to understand is that there are two great prizes on offer. One is the security of our planet, the cleanliness of our air, the safeguarding of our environment. But the other is good jobs right across this country. The greatest assets that we have are found in every corner of this country. The wind and the solar and the hydrogen, the natural assets that belong to all of us in common. These are the things that we ought to be utilising to get good jobs back into every community and get the economy firing on all cylinders. There are 1 million jobs on the road to net zero, and we should be investing to bring them here.
Nandy, I'm going to move on to another question, but before I do, would you like to answer the woman's point at the back about net zero and the government seeming rather more tentative about net zero, and also fracking?
Absolutely. So I'm going to agree with both Brian and Piers on this, i.e. we need energy security, and of course
and
we've got to go green.
Part of that?
Let me just, if you'll allow me, I will get to fracking as well, right? What we do today is we produce about 50% of our energy from low carbon sources. So 99% of all solar energy has been built over the last 10 years. Of course, we've doubled down on offshore wind. And there are new technologies. I saw a brilliant company when I was Chancellor of the Exchequer in Scotland, Nova Technologies.
OK, but Nadhim, in the nicest possible way,
yes.
If we don't answer those two questions in a reasonably sprightly fashion, we won't get a chance to get any other questions in.
All I was going to say, a great Scottish company that does tidal energy and it's operational, they're producing it for the Shetland Islands at the moment. We can expand more of that. But on gas, we're already increasing our gas production because we need it.
OK, fracking.
And of course,
could you answer the question about fracking?
I am about to answer the question,
Good.
I promise you.
Let's hear it.
On fracking, we will only produce gas through fracking if communities actually agree to it. And that's what Liz Truss has said. So if communities want the investment in fracking in their area, where they see the benefit directly to those communities and to the rest of the country.
Have you worked out what that consent mechanism will look like?
And then we're going to produce those plans. The community will then have to actually agree them and back them, and then we would do that. But the most important thing is energy security. When I was Chancellor and I went to the investment committee in Edinburgh and in New York, they said, if you have an energy plan, for the medium term, a nuclear. We want to do more nuclear as well, right? You can't get to net zero, which we want to get to, without investing in large nuclear and in the new technologies in nuclear. SMRs, these are the small modular reactors. We're investing in the Rolls-Royce consortium that will deliver that.
Excellent.
So renewables and gas is the way forward.
Nandy, thank you. Right, let's take another question. Ian Stedford, where are you? There we go. Let's hear your question, please.
New Commissioner Mark Rowley plans to rebuild public trust in the Met Police. Can trust be restored, particularly in the black community, or is this too far gone?
So this is a new commissioner, as you say, of the Metropolitan Police. What's your view?
My view? He's got a job in front of him. He really does. I know there's been a transition. They're trying to move in the right direction, and he's only been in less than a month. But it's drastic out there, and it's dire. And personal experience, literally on Saturday, my son was at a party. It was a diverse group of kids, different backgrounds, different races, having a party. The place, somebody tried to attack the house. The father got assaulted. One of the girls got assaulted. Police took an hour or so to get back. That's not even the end of it. He's on his way home. 4 kids, 3 kids are black, 1 is white. They're running for a bus. The police come out of nowhere, handcuff 2 of the boys. My son comes jogging after to try to calm it down. You wouldn't be surprised to know that the 2 kids that got arrested or handcuffed were the black kids. The white kid who was there with them as a friend didn't get questioned, didn't get asked.
Okay, right.
My son, sorry, just to quickly, my son then gets handcuffed. They find out he's 16 years old. They check his ID. He's devastated and traumatized from it all. They still kept him in handcuffs for 40 minutes afterwards. He's 16 years old. Now, again, Wilf, you made a mention about mistakes. I understand mistakes, I get mistakes, but there are ramifications for the kind of mistakes you make. I'm a father. If I make a mistake, it affects my community, it affects those who look up to me, all right? Certain mistakes, you got to be mindful. You have to be mindful. Certain mistakes have massive ramifications. What this does to my son, to his friends, to my girls that were there watching, to my wife who's fighting in her job to try and change diversity and inclusion in our society, it makes a massive difference. Sorry. So he's got a hell of a task ahead of him.
Thank you. Well, listen, thank you for sharing your experience. Obviously, we don't know the ins and outs of that case. The police aren't here to put their side of it, but thank you very much for sharing that and to tell us about your 16-year-old son. I mean, Wilfred,
I'd like to answer
Ian was
that
asking you about that.
Is that you cannot police unless you have the community on side. That is the starting point. And that the people who become the collateral damage between this fight to catch the criminals, because that's what the community want, that is what the police want, and the ones who actually get the collateral damage are people like your son. The people who are just innocently going about their business.
So can trust be restored, Wilfred?
Well,
and how can the police go about it?
It has to be. So I think one of the big issues that we have is this, is that you cannot have a situation where the only time you interact with the police is when there's a problem, because actually that's all about negativity. You've got to be able to see the police as a friend. Yes. And just a very simple example. I was in Birmingham this week, and I went up to a policeman and I simply asked him the directions. And the way that man treated me, with courtesy, with kindness, left me with a good feeling about the police. And so when we talk about police on the beat, so people could have that experience, positive experiences with the police, that is going to go a long way for there to be a greater understanding. We have to fix this problem, because you cannot have a community who feel that they're victimized by the police, because we're going to be going round and round and round in that circle.
Okay, let's hear a bit more from Rogers. The woman here in the glasses, yes.
On top of that point, do you think that the new commissioner will ever be able to regain the trust of specifically the women in society, especially after the Sarah Everard case last year?
Okay, and the man there in the cream top?
I believe a really good thing to do to build trust up, to get more police officers on the beat again, because that would make a huge difference to, especially as the lady pointed out, about women feeling safe. You've got more people on the beat would make a big difference.
Okay, and the man behind you there, yeah.
We're not trying to defy gravity with the police. Obviously, they've been subjected to relentless cuts for over a decade, and with so many skills having left the job, is it short-sighted to think we can just pull that back in by employing a few more police officers? Is it not right that we should give them the adequate resources to engage again with the community rather than just blaming them all the time?
Okay. Brian Cox.
I think there's a process of re-education needs to happen, particularly in relationship to the police. I mean, I feel they're very isolated. And as they're isolated, that they behave in a way that's isolated. And I feel that we have to bring them back into the community. I'm all for, you know, when I was a kid, we did have the local police officer on the beat. And he was part of the community, and we engaged in that way. And the separation has gone on for far too long. And there needs to be instruction in social skills, how police relate to the community. They need to learn as much as the community needs to learn to trust them. Now, the problem is the incessant racism that goes on between police and the community, and that's got to stop. But it's also got to be dealt with, and it's got to be dealt with in a proper manner. The police need massive re-education. They need to be brought into the community because they are very important to the community, but they also need to be re-educated in how they deal with the community and the diversity of the community. And that's the problem. It becomes a cabal. That, you know, that certain groups of policemen behave in a certain kind of way because that's how they're supposed to behave. And I think that's wrong. I think we have to re-educate them, and we have to give them a chance to say, look, if you want to do that job, there's a whole different attitude that needs to come into play. And once that attitude comes into play, then things will start like your gentleman who treated Wilfred with total respect. That's what we need to see more of, not what happened to your son. And that needs to be re-educated. We have to train our policemen properly, and we don't.
Piers.
There aren't enough police officers, full stop. The Tories took 20,000 off the streets and then wondered why crime went up and why, for example, a staggering statistic, that only 1 in 6 knife crimes, including when knives are used in murder, rape and GBH, are ever solved. It's crazy. That means 5 out of 6 don't get solved. And the reason is because there aren't enough police to investigate crime. I don't think any particular community could say they have got great confidence in the police. And I want to defend the police. I think most police officers are good people. There aren't enough of them. They're overworked, they're stressed, they're under constant attack. The bad apples in their ranks have given them all a bad name. Yeah. I think they're feeling hunted and they're feeling under real assault. I've got confidence in the new commissioner, but they've got to go back to old-fashioned police work. And old-fashioned's a sort of ugly word these days, but I don't know why. Go back to the old bobbies on the beat, the neighbourhood cops. I lived in a little village in Sussex. We all knew who the policeman was, and we were all a bit worried about it, that he might catch us up to no good, which most of the time we were. But we all were aware who he was, and he was the focal point of local authority. I think a lot of people these days feel if they get burgled, if they have their car nicked, whatever it is, nothing happens. You know, I had a personal thing of this, which I just found really depressing. I had a death threat made to me on Instagram, in public, on my son's Instagram page. Very specific, from a person who put his name, made a death threat. We're going to get round big tech, get round the police. We're going to come and kill you, right? Be under no illusion. We know where you are. We're going to kill you. And then said to my son, and if we don't get your dad, we're going to come for you and your mother. So I thought, I'm not having this. I reported it to the police. That was February last year. An arrest was made in August last year. They still haven't got round to charging it. When I raised it with the detective, she said, we're just so rushed. I'm sorry. This was a death threat, which is illegal. And if it's happening to high-profile people, what is happening to people every single minute of the day? Most of these kind of crimes simply aren't being investigated. I think most British people would like more police and more police to go back to doing their proper job, protecting the public and investigating crime.
Lisa, we're coming close to the end of the programme.
Well, I mean, worst of all scenarios for me, here I am agreeing with Piers again.
You know, it's getting to be a habit.
I know. Well, I'm sure it'll all kick off in the green.
It won't last, Lisa, won't worry.
But I mean, look, I think getting more police back onto the streets, but neighbourhood police, where there's a proper relationship, has got to be a priority. Police who know their neighbourhood and their communities tend to be much more accountable to their communities. And Wilfred's point about policing by consent in this country is really important. It's why we've set out plans to get more police into our neighbourhoods, to to rebuild those relationships and to help those very many good police officers who are desperate to be able to reconnect and have that relationship. But I think there is a particular problem with the Met that has rumbled on and on and on. And I think you're right, the new commissioner has to be given time to do his job, but he has got a big job on his hands. I grew up in Manchester as a mixed-race kid in the 1980s when trust between the community and the police had completely collapsed. And I'm telling you, it takes a generation to rebuild it. We should start now. We should hold people accountable for what they do. There's an inquiry going on at the moment into the death of Chris Cabba. That has to report in full, it has to be transparent, it has to be accountable, and there have to be consequences for what has been done. But secondly, we've got to change the culture. There's a review going on at the moment into the culture and standards in the Met Police as well. And I will say to you personally that I and others in Parliament will make sure that that review is implemented and that we don't have another generation growing up having lost trust in the police.
Nadhim, reasonably brief if you would mind.
I think in Sir Mark Rowley's second day, I had the privilege of working with him to coordinate Her Majesty's funeral commemoration, and I have to say the police were remarkable in policing that extraordinary 11 days where we showed the world that we can set our differences, including politicians. You know, Sadiq Khan was with us in the room every single day, doing the work, coordinating everything we need to do. John Swinney in Scotland did a brilliant job of the Scottish people coming out for their Queen as well. We're all well on our way of getting another 20,000 officers into policing. We want to see whether it's homicide, serious violence or neighbourhood crime come down by 20% and judge us by our delivery over the next 2 years on that. Serious violent crime. Because we had an economy that was crashed when we took office in 2010.
20,000 police officers.
You know that when we inherited an economy that was on its knees in 2010. But serious violent crime and overall crime has come down, but fraud and online crime hasn't come down. We've got to do something about that as well. But I do agree with Lisa on this, that culture's important. Giving the police the technology to have, so when they have a camera, so they can actually, if there is an inquiry, you can see what happened on the incident. I think that's also an important part of this. But Mark, I think, has started well and will continue to make sure that police are focused on crime, on visiting every burglary. That's what we want to see every police force do. All these things mean that community confidence is returned, and that's the right thing to do.
Let's go back to Ian. You asked this question.
Yes.
Are you encouraged by what you're hearing or not?
I am, and I got a bit passionate, so I kind of lost my way a little bit there. Two things I think really does need to make. One little correction. The police officer did stay at the end after I got there, my wife got there. He did speak to us. He did try to calm the situation down. He made a mistake. And I see he made a mistake. How do we change that mistake from happening again? We train them. So you need to recruit those who are from the community because they know what our community is about. And if they're not from our community, they need to be educated. And that's where that's going to change is going to come. Second, not only do we need to talk about the local Bobby, we need our local Bobbies back. All right. When I grew up, we had PC Elliott. He used to come to the school and all of that. Where I used to live in Clapham North. You had an officer there. Can't remember his name. Ginger beard, really nice guy. When you see him, he gave you the nod. How you doing? Appreciation, acknowledgement. That's what we want. That's what the community needs.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sure PC Elliott will be very pleased with his shout out in on the programme. Our hour is up. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the panel. Thank you to the audience for coming along here this evening. And, of course, thank you to you at home for watching. From Question Time, until next week. Bye-bye.